It's the Week 9 edition of the Coach's Corner on Rivalry Family Media. Great to have you along with us for another week of Leominster High School football action. Todd Robbins, joined as always by Leominster High School head coach Devin Gates, as we get set for Week 9 non-playoff action as Leominster plays host to the Eagles of Worcester Technical High School. We had challenged the committee at the conclusion of our radio broadcast last week, find a creative opponent, and there was some on my shopping list for creative opponents. Worcester Tech was not on there, but I kudos for Worcester Tech being the selection from the committee to at least find some creativity and not deciding to take the easy way out and scheduling just rematches from previous games throughout the season. So creativity is what we asked for. Creativity is what we've gotten with Worcester Tech and Leominster coming up. More on that coming up in a matter of moments. But first, Coach, before we preview this week's action, let's talk back a little bit about this Week 8 game. A 27-7 loss to Shrewsbury. Your record falls to 2-6. Shrewsbury evens their record to 4-4. It was a game the Colonials absolutely had to have in order to qualify for the playoffs. And for your team, it was a game you felt like you guys absolutely wanted to have in order for that senior night to feel like, you had reached a culmination of, having persevered through a lot. And it felt like you just couldn't quite get over the hump in that football game. Talk to me about what you saw as you kind of went through and experienced it.
Yeah, I mean, it felt good coming out. I know that Caden had a good run to start the game, and we felt that offensively we could do some stuff there. Especially in between the tackles. They flowed pretty hard on defense. We've thought that we could be able to get some cutbacks, some misdirection stuff, and be able to maybe run some power right at them too. And we did that for the better part of the game. We really, but when it came down to needing a play to extend a drive, we either didn't make the play or we had penalties called that were drive killers or snaps above the head that really hurt us when we were able to get some yardage offensively and try to get in the area to score points. So most of those obviously being self-inflicted, and we're not going to win many football games doing that. So that stuff needs to get fixed. Shrewsbury had a good plan. They kind of attacked certain soft spots in our defense, and they came and they stuck to their plan. And even when we were able to have some success defensively, they didn't scrap what they were doing. They came right back to it. And kudos to them. They made the plays when they needed to, and that was the difference in the game.
As you look, of course, at your team's attack, you mentioned, of course, the run from Caden Constant to open the football game, and it felt like a really big moment in the game. That first opening run for you guys offensively felt like it was going to really be a catapulting moment that, things may move forward. And then so often, as we've kind of seen throughout the year, these moments of great success find something, some landmine pops up, like you said, whether it's a self-inflicted play, whether it's a flag that comes out, whether it's something that puts you out of position, and all of a sudden, what seems like, a really great drive launcher ends up, kind of getting mired, and then things aren't able to advance. How do you continue to A, persevere through those moments, but B, maybe cure and correct some of that moving forward?
Obviously it's challenging, and it's frustrating when the guys, we make a good play and then all of a sudden we get bogged down. But the guys get to see that we're capable of breaking those big plays, and as soon as we stop, doing our job or do something out of what we're asking them to do, and a lot of that stuff comes from kids being frustrated and wanting to make plays, right? They want to go out there, they want to execute, they want to be the guy that goes out there and makes the big block. But a lot of times that ends up in blocking the wrong man or doing the wrong assignment, not, just for the fact that they want to make a play for their team. And I get that part that we're doing now, but it really just comes back to, and as cliche as it sounds, just do your job, do what we're asking you to do. And this stuff is going to come through for us. We start getting penalties when we start doing too much. We start trying to make a little something extra happen instead of just doing what we're supposed to be doing to the best of our ability. That's really what the kid what we really need to do, as far as a coaching staff, harping on that, and the kids just really need to realize it, because that's when we play our best football.
Certainly, there have been opportunities where those have shown themselves throughout the season. One thing I would certainly say from a Shrewsbury perspective that stood out to me had to be the play of Jack O'Sullivan at quarterback. Certainly seemed like he had that moment, where he either was able to distribute the football at the right place, threw, a couple of beautiful passes at the right time, and found the right person, whether it be crossing or in the right place on the field. And it just seemed like it advanced the ball to the right place, or even positionally to be able to have somebody who can drop back on fourth down and quick kick essentially and move the ball down the field. It's something that I think for opposition like yourself, you don't see that all the time. And so for players, of course, it becomes unfamiliar, it feels uncomfortable, and it, of course, leads to situations where it opens up opportunities.
For sure. No, he had a great game, and distributed the ball when he needed to, right? And it came through on some big plays where, they got to move the chains, or, keep them on the field to keep us from getting on the field. Because I know that they needed to win the game for, playoff wise. They needed to win it, in convincing fashion to get the margin of victory. So, he did a good job of making sure that we didn't get back on the field. They maximized their time of possession. And he just played a great game. And the quick kicks there too to pin us and to kind of throw us off balance. And he did really well. And it's something that we can point to and say, hey, this is big players make plays like this when the games are on the line. And that's something that we need some guys to do and step up. We talked about at halftime, we talked about who's going to be the guy that's going to go and make the play. Who's going to go up and battle for a ball, that's thrown up that could be challenged. Who's going to make the block that springs the big play? Who's going to be the guy that goes out and make the play by doing what you're supposed to do to the best of your ability, like I said. And we had some guys come through there, but we're still looking for some guys to emerge.
And certainly, as you mentioned, of course, pointing out some of these things, some of your losses this year, this one being one of them, and there were others throughout the year, when you look at them on the face of it and you're able to have the clarity of looking back at the conclusion of it, you can look to your team and say, this is not a team that is all that dramatically dissimilar to us in what they've been able to do and the success that they've been able to achieve. So it certainly gives you a measuring stick, a target, something to aim for.
Sure. And I think the guys recognize that that's a team that it should have been a closer game, that we could certainly compete with. It was certainly, if we play 10 times, maybe it's 50-50. I really firmly believe that with Shrewsbury, that we're right there. And our kids need to believe that. They need to trust each other. They need to trust what they're doing in the process. And it's something that's still, they're still working through, and I hate to even say it, at this point of the season too, but it's the fact of where we're at. The guys really need to trust the game that they're playing and really, go out and play 100 miles an hour, because they're still not able to do that. There's still some tentativeness, in making plays. And the guys just going to trust what they're doing, trust their reads, and go out there and make the plays and just play loose. And right now, I feel like we're playing a little too tight.
And that, of course, is the progression that we will see. A 27-7 loss to Shrewsbury. Leominster finishes the regular season at 2-6. Shrewsbury at 4-4. Good enough for what ultimately ended up being, and this was something we couldn't see. We knew they would hold on at least to their 16th spot in Division One. It actually was good enough to advance up one spot into the 15th slot when the slide occurred to bring Shrewsbury in opposition playoff wise. They will play St. John's Prep from Danvers coming up on Friday night in their Division One playoff matchup. And all of that, Coach, kind of belies the direction we're going here in Week 9. And it has been a strange week, to say the least. Probably the only people having a worse week, at their job, it might be the folks over at the MIAA, who certainly had a struggle of a week to try to be able to get all of this together, get all of the pieces to come together in order to get things in place. And by the way, kudos to the Central Mass Committee, because they certainly were prepared with their non-playoff games. They had already arranged those decisions. So when the playoff announcements came out, there was only one division, one section of the state that announced their non-playoff games at that moment, and it was Central Mass. So the Central Mass Football Committee was prepared with their homework as to who was going to play one another. Had they playoff options, falling the way they did. And they were able to announce right off the bat that, of course, Leominster would host Worcester Tech at Doyle Field this week. That, of course, also tells us that the likelihood is that in week 10, you will find yourselves on the road at a place to be determined. I'd seen a question out there earlier today on social media asking when we'll know about that. And the answer would be sometime Sunday at the conclusion of this week's action, because, of course, the teams that don't advance after this week in the playoffs come down into the non-playoff format as well. And then, of course, there's usually some kind of pairings for wins and losses and a formula that matches teams up going into the 10th week after action in the 9th. So the only thing we can sort of sketch out is that in the 10th week, Leominster will find themselves on the road. But here in week 9, you're going to get a playoff team that, in my opinion, should have been a 7-1 football team from Worcester Tech out of Division 5. To me, it sounds like a team that should have made the playoffs, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but that's going to be the team that you are going to host at Doyle Field. And as I said right off the top, kudos for a creative solution in putting teams together. And as I looked at the matchups top to bottom, that's certainly what stood out to me in the non-playoffs, is that this year they did, as a committee, do a good job of trying to use the eye test, use the information available to them, and say these two teams are equatable. And regardless of anything else, put them together. As you looked at the non-playoff table up and down, what kind of stood out to you? How did you see the pairings come out?
I mean, I thought they were creative. I mean, there are obviously some teams that, I think the Neshoba and Algonquin are playing again, and I think they want to try to avoid those situations when they can, and, make sure that the matchups are, fairly even in terms of, division. With us, with Worcester Tech, I mean, it's pretty creative. It's not something that I, foresaw, doing that, but, they had a great season at 7-1. Coach Robbins has done a great job bringing that program to where it is right now. He's worked really hard to do so, and the kids have worked really, really hard. And you feel for them that they didn't get in when when any team wins, 7 games and loses 1, they should be deserved. That's deserving of, of a playoff berth. They didn't, for the most part, the kids didn't create the schedule. They played the teams that were in front of them and they executed. So, they should be there. With that being said, it's a football game for us. We're going to get ready to go like we would at, any normal week. And, that's what we're going to do. We got another chance to go play on Doyle Field, which is always special, especially for the seniors here to have another one. And we're preparing hard this week. We had a great practice tonight. Just a little bit of a slow start, and they had to get after the kids a little bit, but they responded really, really well, as they normally do. So, looking forward to, the rest of the practices this week and preparing and, playing a team that I'm not even sure we've ever played before.
I'm fairly confident it's the first meeting that I can tell, certainly in the area since I've been around. We'll talk a little bit more about that Worcester Tech team in a moment, but you alluded to this 7-1 football team that certainly should have qualified. And there are a bunch of teams, and I suppose in any playoff format, I mean, one need only look at the history of college football in the recent era between the BCS and now the CFP and whatever the next iteration of this is ultimately going to be. Anytime you draw a line and you don't, put everybody just in a forced ranked order and say everybody's in, somebody's going to make an argument that a team that landed on a bubble should have made themselves into a tournament berth. That said, I think in this circumstance, we've kind of been chronicling it right along. There are some concerns, and it was raised on social media, about how you would have teams that are, like you said, in this case, 7-1 or 6-2, an Algonquin team, another team that I certainly feel for because I feel like they did everything they possibly could and had their game against Wachusett maybe bounced another way. Maybe they are in, and they're a 7-1 football team that qualifies. But then again, they were routinely ranked behind teams that had 3 less wins than they did going into that given week. So something sure didn't add up throughout the process. It's not a great surprise to me that when it came time, they didn't qualify, but it's something about that says this isn't right. And so when we go back and look at all of these things, obviously it wasn't the circumstance you were in, but what do you say as just in this case, a neutral observer, for this format? How do you evaluate this? How do you make decisions going forward? And if you were in their situation, how do you explain this to a group of high school athletes who, like you said, did what they were supposed to do? You say, go out there and win every game that's in front of you, and you will, good things will happen for you. Losing one game in a high school season shouldn't mean that you didn't do the best you possibly could. 7-1's a good record. 6-2 is as well.
Yeah. And I don't know, what a good answer is there. I mean, I know that that conversation obviously is, I think it was for Coach Taylor, Coach Mark Allen, and Coach Robbins, it was an extremely tough conversation. Because as a coach, you come with your core values and what your team is about and how you're going to carry yourselves. And when the kids go out there and execute what you told them to, what you said is going to, you do this and we're going to be successful and you guys are going to see it pay off. And when you do what you're supposed to do and it doesn't pay off, what message are we sending to the kids? What? And again, this isn't a shot at any other teams that made it in, because they have to play.
Sure.
They're not the ones deciding this. They're just playing the games that are in front of them. But to me, it's just such a tough situation. I don't have any good answers or any concrete answers or any one fix that's gonna that's gonna make it all get better. But I think it's tough just because it takes away, I think, a lot of the incentive to schedule competitive games sometimes too. If you're going to go out there and try to, you want to get as much margin of victory as you can. And, it's a tough situation. And, obviously it deserves a lot of going through with a fine tooth comb in the off season and seeing where we can improve things, seeing if there's something we could add a variable to the equation that can, better, more quality control to the power rankings. It doesn't feel right for whatever reason.
And you, to your credit, from the very moment we started talking about all of this, and of course we had some time with COVID and strange years and everything else to be able to discuss some of this as this has sort of evolved to the place that we are. And there were certainly situations we saw coming and have pointed them out as we went through this process. But you have been a very staunch advocate, I would say, through our conversations on air and off, that this max prep system that was initially viewed as the way to go and was contracted as going to be the way that things were going to advance, through your experience from the college level and using it to evaluate talent, you thought that was a positive direction. And then ultimately, obviously, folks decided on a different, more homegrown, controlled format. If you were to, best you can, draw a distinction between what we are using here with the current Massachusetts system and what Max Preps would have done, how would you explain to a lay person the difference between the way that they would have evaluated talent?
Well, it's tough because I don't even really fully understand the depth of the levels that Max Preps goes. But
a proprietary system, they said that right off the bat. It was part of the objection to the whole system, was that it was a proprietary system and you don't get to know how the sausage was made. So take it from there.
But my understanding is that it takes straight to schedule, a couple of layers deep, straight to the schedule of the team that you played, the straight to the schedule of their opponents, and the straight to the schedule of their opponents. So therefore, just having a lot more data points where you can kind of come through and have the margin of error be a lot less. And even before I was at Leominster, as a college coach, just looking at, I always felt like it was pretty close to spot on where they rank teams and in a certain year with what conferences, what divisions that they play in, and how strong the teams are. It always felt like when you go back and you look through the rankings, like, well, that makes sense. That's probably where they should be. And I always felt that was pretty accurate. And I think what's missing in the MIA equation is that strength of schedule. You got a team like Bridgewater and Raynham. I don't think they ended up making it in overall, but I know that they were ahead of Algonquin for most of the year at in Division II. They play a tough schedule. When you got teams like Brockton, you get teams that go out there and they win their games. I guess you can count that as kind of straight the schedule, but it's really just the margin of victory, and that's what they're going with. And I think there definitely needs to be again some other variable that takes into account straight the schedule of opponents and opponents of opponents to be able to more accurately place teams on this power ranking.
And of course, you've got the varying experience here with seeing a number of different systems, implemented both at the high school level, but also at the college level, who have for years in all their divisions tried to find ways to best quantify, how do you rank talent and decide who ultimately makes a postseason tournament. And one of the things I think that was floated out there this week was a discussion about, why not just use the records of teams, and I guess I'll put that to you and let you take it as the person who's experienced it. Why not just use, you were a 7-1 football team and 7-1 is better than 6-2. Therefore, 7-1 is in, and maybe 6-2 is out if everybody was 7-1. Why is it that we need more than just a team's record in order to determine who qualifies for a playoff format?
Well, again, there's that incentive again to schedule competitive games, right? You still want to be able to play. As a competitor, I want to play better teams and see how you do against better teams. At least that's my own philosophy. But in a system like that, where your record, you can schedule down a lot more than you probably schedule down more than up, and it doesn't create. It creates a distorted view of what how good that team might be. So that's why I do think that there's got to be another level or another level or two of screening to get more accurately portray that team's ranking and how good that team is.
I would say the most challenging part of trying to read the numbers, well, of course, as a layperson and as a member of the media who's trying to understand it, and of course led to a lot of the discussion, was when you're looking up and down at these rankings that were published each week, when you would see numbers in the quote unquote opponent value column that was so dramatically larger than what your own value was. Teams were essentially given a value for themselves and a value for their opponents. And then there was a cumulative value that was put there. And that's how they generated these ranks. And so what it left me continually saying, and maybe we've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but we'll revisit it here, where I struggled so much is that based on that theory, then it meant that losing football games to quote unquote better teams was of a higher value than winning football games against other football teams. Better, worse, it didn't really seem to matter. It just seemed like much more emphasis lived in the fact that you could play teams and be out on the field with a better team and have a negative result and still end up better off in the circumstance. Something about that was where they kept losing me in the conversation.
That's the biggest hurdle right now, I think, with both of those counting equally towards your team's final score. Yeah, I think more emphasis, however they weight it, is going to be placed on your own value as opposed to, again, it's almost strength of schedule, but if you're playing a team that you lose to by 2 touchdowns, but yeah, they go on and they beat everybody else, that's still, that to me is an uneven balance of worth, obviously. So I think more emphasis is going to be placed on your own value, whether that's 2-1 in terms of a ratio or however they want to figure that out. But I think 50-50 is not equitable in terms of coming to the right conclusion of a team's value.
And of course, then we arrive at the conversation that everybody, loves to talk about in this process, which is that if this is the case and this continues to move forward, then the coaches who are going to adapt and take a message from what they get for information, they're going to turn around and go, well, okay, give me the top 5 teams if they're willing to play me, because it doesn't do them any good necessarily to play teams that didn't make the playoffs, but give me the top 5 teams and all I have to do is schedule them. And even if I lose to them, I'm going to end up better off as long as I can get myself to 3 or 4 wins. And something about that in schedule construction and in aspiration just seems wrong as a leaping off point.
Sure, I agree. I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, yeah, it creates scheduling strategies that don't feel great in terms of purity and in the spirit of the game. That's where I'm concerned.
Can you see a circumstance down the road here as part of course, making this all come together and fit? Can you see a place where the high school level here in Massachusetts, at least for football to start and probably adopted by the other sports if found successful, mirrors a little bit of the collegiate system in the sense that you have games in a league or conference or division or whatever you want to call it, and then you have sort of the flexibility to be able to go sign non-conference deals with teams from outside of that window, that grouping, whatever you want to call it, that will allow you to round out your schedule and perhaps challenge yourself. And I suppose in previous iterations of the Massachusetts system, that sort of existed, but it seems like we're getting further and further away from that and more and more and more in a very regional concept, while we're also thinking statewide, which doesn't seem to add up either.
Yeah, we've had discussions, at least with the mid-watch A coaches about, And I know that Mike Dubzinski is a big proponent of this, is, going out and playing like all the dual county teams. Like we're trying to schedule like a crossover between Midwatch and dual county, and trying to do something like that where we have a partnership between the conferences. So, there is some parity in terms of our schedules. There's also like opponents there, and and again, it's all like what school, like what school you're going to be in terms of how you're going to schedule your games. And it's tough, and I don't have all the answers yet, because even myself, I can't wrap my head around all of the different scenarios here, and what all these numbers mean. It's still tough for me to even still conceptualize everything too. So, at least in the off season, we're really gonna have to take a creative look at what we want to do scheduling wise. And again, I'm not opposed to that idea of doing a cross conference partnership. Again, we talk about creative scheduling and playing outside of the region a little bit, and playing some that's a chance for Central Mass teams to go out and play some Eastern Mass teams, or some teams that from traditionally powerful conferences, and trying to see where we stack up on a statewide stage, which is obviously why you were doing this playoff system in the first place.
Why we're even having this conversation. And for those that are not avid social media watchers in this, of course, arena, there's been a few posts over the last 24 to 48 hours that are some real winners here. This not necessarily football related, Coach, but tell me how you would feel if you were the coaches involved in this circumstance. This comes from the volleyball tournament. Matt Feld reporting via Twitter that this is the poster child for the statewide tournament. And that would be a first round volleyball matchup that includes Monument Mountain. And if you could identify where that is, as we list it, you're doing better than I am in this conversation, because I couldn't place Monument Mountain on a map. And they are going to travel to Nantucket, which, according to Matty Feld's reporting, involves going from Monument Mountain to Hyannis via ferry, 3 hours and 9 minutes, and then a ferry to Nantucket for another 1 hour, a round trip, as reported by Matt Feld on Twitter, of 8 hours and 20 minutes. Do you want to play that game on a Friday night, Coach, or would you like to see that on a Saturday if that turns out to a football game?
No, that would have to be a Saturday, guys. It's a tough draw. It's a tough draw. And again, I always go back to this too, because I do like a statewide playoff. It's something that I feel strengthens the football in Massachusetts. Overall, obviously I think things need to be done better, but it's all relative. You look at other states like Texas and these bigger states, and they got to do this travel a lot more than we do too. So we're just not used to it, with everything being so regional, everything being so close, that it doesn't feel great. But again, it's all relative. But yeah, that's a tough draw first round to have to go and do that. But you can't exclude these teams that are out in the Cape. And the problem here, Todd, I know we talked off air about it. I know I've had a conversation with a number of different coaches. It's tough when you want a statewide playoff. You want to keep regions relevant. You want to keep conferences relevant, and you want to keep Thanksgiving relevant. You can't have all four of them. It's just not going to work. And everything's so split with what people want that it's just really creating a tough position for the kids right now in terms of the structure of high school football in Massachusetts. And I think some hard decisions are going to have to be made. Obviously, we want to keep Thanksgiving. We value that, above a lot of other things, in terms of the rivalry we have with Fitchburg and how special that is to a lot of people in the area. And it'd be a shame not to have that anymore. And I don't necessarily think it's going to go in that direction when we're not playing Thanksgiving games. But we can't have our cake and eat it too when it comes to the statewide playoff and having X amount of teams make it, and still keep conferences and regions relevant too. There needs to be an overall thought shift in terms of scheduling, and in terms of, what we're going to value or what we're going to talk about as a conference. Those conversations need to be had.
And of course, there has been the Twitter war over the last 24 to 48 hours about why can't we do this better and why can't we just expand the season. And then, of course, that starts into the war between football and basketball. And then there's another county heard from in the spring, the folks that are out there, that coach baseball and softball and those athletes as well. And all of that is relevant. I would say, only having been involved with sports in all of those seasons, that I don't necessarily see extending the season. And of course, we said this throughout the time when COVID happened. And last year, it forced the seasons to have to get pushed all the way to the end of June and into July come spring. And it's happened in years past because of poor weather in the springtime where the seasons have to move. Why don't we just pick up and move it? And then, of course, people just go bananas about, oh my God, well, the basketball season has to start by a certain. Well, no, it doesn't. You can always back the basketball season up a week, back the spring season up a week. And if worse comes to worse, it goes to the end of June or into the early part of July. It involves, of course, some creative budgeting because of course, the June 30th deadline for, education budgets. But what we do know is, having been a spring sports official, the weather in New England, particularly here in Massachusetts, is not getting any better in the month of April. And so it is only getting worse, which means that the later into April you can start that season, the better off you are for getting games out on fields, being able to have tryouts outdoors. There's a lot of things that happen in the spring, which then means that if that can move, then basketball can move. You're not taking anything away, just basketball moves a week. And then obviously football's able to move a week. And maybe we can cure some of these problems and look at a format, again, as you point out, where you can include Thanksgiving and some of these other things. Would you be a proponent of a 13th week?
I mean, I'd be a proponent of that, but I can see where there's pushback in other sports, and I think you nailed it too with the fiscal timeline. I think is a real issue that it's going to take a decent amount of creative problem solving. I'm not sure that every district and every school is willing to do that. It also takes into account you still got coaches and teachers that are coaching. Does that go into how does that work with their contracts and whatnot in time? I mean, there's a lot of other things that kind of happen there that but again, for me, it's a real easy yes. I mean, it's we're still going to be in school. It's our we can push it back a week. It's not going to be, or we start a week earlier. Either way, I think there's a way to kind of fit that in to make it happen. We already start later than most states do, in terms of our fall season. So there's a way to get it done. That's for sure.
And the argument associated to that was always we start a week later because we play on Thanksgiving. That was always the connected argument, is that we start later than other parts of the country because we have Thanksgiving Day games, and therefore that runs us later. Well, at this point, not to suggest that you're getting rid of Thanksgiving games, but if you're looking for places to expand the year, give teams more flexibility, be able to fix some of this, one way to do it would be to move it up a week. It also does get you to your 13th theoretical week of high school football. More of that to be discussed in the weeks ahead, Coach, as we move forward, and probably the years to come as well. As I'm guessing this is not a one-year fix to our conversation. Let's turn our attention to Week 9 action coming up here on Friday night. It is, so far as we can tell, a first-of-its-kind meeting between the Eagles of Worcester Tech and the Leominster High School Blue Devils at Doyle Field. 7 o'clock kickoff per every Friday night. The countdown to kickoff will be on the air streaming, facebook.com, and search out WPKZ radio for that. That is where the audio action will be. You'll have your 1 hour countdown to kickoff beginning at 6 o'clock on Friday night. Follow that up then with kickoff at 7 with Kate Robbins on the play-by-play, with, of course, a TBD serving as analyst, as Bill Thomas and I will be on the road traveling to Westfield for Fitchburg, traveling to Westfield. So it's, as I dubbed it in 2019, it's split squad action, kind of like you had in spring training baseball. You just take the team and divide it in half and go in opposite directions. The only problem is 3 doesn't divide evenly. And so we have to find a way in order to fill all those gaps, or Bill Thomas has to be in 2 places at once. So we're still working on that solution, that all to be determined. But let's talk about Week 9 action for you, Coach, at Doyle Field. It's Worcester Tech. You said it. It's a 7-1 team. I said it. You've said it. It's a team that should be in the playoffs. That means this is no slouch coming to Doyle Field on Friday night. And it's a team that is going to be determined to make a point, which is we'd like to play the team a few divisions above us, and we would absolutely like to slap them around in order to make the point that we should have been a playoff team.
No, they have a lot to prove, and I think that they're going to come in here and be ready, and and relish the challenge. I think they're going to be, like you said, poke the hornet's nest with them not being able to be in the playoffs, and they're going to come in here as a team on a mission. We got to be ready to deal with that. We're playing at home, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful the guys get a chance to do that. But this is a team that if we're complacent and we come in here not ready to play, that they could come out here and really punch us in the mouth. It's a good football team. It's a well-coached football team. We'll see a lot of different formations from them offensively. They've played some flex bone similar to Shepherd Hill. They've played some, then they've gone spread, and then I think most consistently they're in the I formation as well too. So you'll see a couple different formations with them. Number 5 is their primary weapon on offense. He's a really good runner, versatile. They'll put him all over the field to get him the ball and kind of spread it out a little bit. And the quarterback does a good job too. He throws on time. He throws a good ball. And then on defense, they have a defensive lineman 56. And forgive me for not knowing the names.
No, certainly, we're all learning them together.
Yes, it was the first. Last night was the first time I got a chance to see some film. So, but a defensive lineman 56 who's really got a good motor and gets off the ball well. So those are guys we're gonna have to account for and have a plan for. And we're working that this week.
And that is, of course, the name of the game, is to try to prepare for that opponent ahead. And of course, Coach, there was some discussion, and we'll bring this into the conversation, tying together what we were talking about, the late nature of this. Of course, there was some objections by, of course, playoff teams, but there's objections for non-playoff teams, losing a day in your preparation and kind of having to change how you all stack your week. Everybody had to do it, of course, so that's certainly one thing you can say. It's not like one team gains an advantage on that, but what does losing a day in the week do, just so that people from the outside understand, what does that do to teams? Because there was, of course, the people online, they're like, well, I don't know what these coaches are all upset about. But to me, from as the outside perspective as a media member, it's based on a 4-day prep week into a 5th day game is the average layout for how you guys organize yourself. What does losing a day do to the overall kind of layout to your week?
Well, it puts us behind. It certainly makes us focus on maybe not some of the finer details and really the guts of what they want to do. Our prep really starts on Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning after the game. We get the film from the next opponent, and we already start breaking that down and making our plan for the week. So Saturday, in terms of the coaching staff, those are big days to prepare, to watch film and have a plan ready to go, so that when we meet with the kids on Monday and watch film, Mondays usually we watch film, we lift, and we do a walkthrough of what our plan is of the week. And not having that plan available yet, in terms of an in-depth plan, we're able to kind of show them, I think we were able to see some stuff right before we took the field, like literally like 10 minutes before we took the field. So we were able to show them the formations, that at least that they're going to be in, even if we didn't have personnel, we didn't have all the plays. So then we got to scramble, we got to work, usually, we'll break down film of our practices the other night, but now we got to spend that time breaking down film of the team, where we normally would do that on the weekend. So it does put us behind a little bit, but we're going to, do what we got to do to catch up and, make sure that the kids are ready and prepared.
And that is, of course, the way things will break out as we get set for Friday night action. Leominster and Worcester Tech at Doyle Field, the 7:00 kickoff. You can head on down and be a part of that one, or you can catch it on our usual coverage at Leominster TV. 6:50, they will join up with their coverage per usual with Kate Robbins and Question Mark, along with, of course, as we turn out the audio coverage that will be available on the K-Zone's Facebook page. It's at WPKZ Radio on Facebook. Find that at facebook.com/WPKZ Radio for the audio coverage. Of course, you always have time. You've got dueling abilities. You've got your transistor radio, which you can dust off and fire that up to AM 1280 and 105.3 FM. And you can get Westfield hosting Fitchburg in playoff action. Bill Thomas and I will be out there for a 7:00 kickoff and a 6:00 countdown to kickoff on the radio frequencies. And then you've got your Leominster game right there on your smart-enabled device from social media. Great way all around. Leominster.tv will have their stream once we reach the top of the hour as well at 7:00 on Friday night. So many ways to be a part of it as we move our way into action coming up this week. And then, of course, coaches, we say each and every week, the week doesn't begin until you get your preview right here on the Coach's Corner. We'll be back for Week 10 action 1 week from now against an opponent that also is a question mark, which leads me to my very last point from social media, which was my favorite tweet of the week, which belonged to, I believe it was the head coach from Franklin, Coach Bain, I believe, is sticking out in my mind, who had his picture of his practice chart, and it had a giant question mark on it, which I believe was the tweet of the week that basically amounted to, this is my practice plan for the week because I don't know who I'm playing, and he was the top seed in his division.
No, I think I would second that vote for a top tweet of the week. Yeah.
Top
Coach
tweet of the week?
out
No
there.
doubt about it.
Everybody was thinking it. Coach Bain put it out there. So.
No question about that. For Leominster High School head coach Devin Gates, I am Todd Robbins saying thank you so very much for joining us. Join us for coverage coming up this week of Week 9 action and right back here for the Coach's Corner in Week 10 next week. Until then, so long, everybody.